Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll move on to the number 2 UFA on our list out of our top 5, and that's Dmitry Orlov, the Russian defenseman. Went from Washington to the Boston Bruins at the trade deadline, along with Garnet Hathaway, and just like Barbashev with Vegas, Orlov fit like a glove with the Boston Bruins. Even though they unfortunately lost in round 1 to the Florida Panthers, as we know, but Orlov was a good player there. I don't think he re-signs with the Boston Bruins, though. We'll get to that in a minute. But where do you see Dmitry Orlov ending up, and is it back in Washington?
Well, so unlike Ivan Barbashev, I don't think that Dmitry Orlov will be able to re-sign in Boston like you think Barbashev will be able to in Vegas. There's just no way Boston's able to afford it. Washington's an interesting case. I thought about that a lot, but I kind of wanted to go off the board for this one. But before I give you the team and contract prediction, I'll just read a couple of stats to tell you why he's so valuable. He played the most minutes of any player on the UFA list this year. So any player whose contract is up, he played the most at about 22 minutes a night. So consistent top pair or top 4 minutes on 2 pretty good teams. I know Washington didn't finish very highly this year, but it's still a pretty good team. They just had some injury trouble, and they're in a bit of a retool situation. But Boston, that's a great team, and he still played top 4 minutes for them as well. He's been a remarkably consistent, around 30-point player from the back end, driving a little bit of offense from back there, which is great to have, makes a great first pass, and is responsible in his own end as well. He did have 17 points in 23 games with Boston going into the playoffs after the trade deadline, which was phenomenal in my opinion. He was kind of carrying some of the offense on the back end there, along with a guy like Hampus Lindholm, who, by the way, did you see that he finished in the top 6, I want to say, in Norris voting? Lindholm, you see that?
Yeah, I sure did. Rasmus Dahlin was 8th in voting.
That was wild to me. Dahlin was the front runner almost for half a season and then finished 8th. But anyway, so Orlov's a hell of a player. He's coming off of a deal that paid him $5.1 for 6 straight years. I think he'll get a little bit of a raise on that. My prediction is $6 million times 5 years in Florida. And I think Florida makes sense because that's a team who I think is restructuring their blue line. We know that they give up a ton of scoring chances against, and they're going to be losing a guy like Radko Gudas in the offseason because I don't think they really want to pay him what another team will in UFA. I think Gudas is going to get overpaid, and I think Florida knows that, and they're probably happy to see him walk. I could be totally wrong. I know they like the player, but I think someone will give him probably too much money, like Nick Leddy money, maybe like a 4x4 or something. I could see happen. It, man. Couldn't you?
Yeah, I could see it too. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I've got him going to Florida. I think it makes a ton of sense. Plays the left side, can move the puck, can create some offense, take the burden off of a guy like Aaron Ekblad. And we forget too, they don't have Mackenzie Weegar anymore, and their back end is pretty thin. If they didn't have Bobrovsky in the playoffs, I don't know where they would be because that back end gives up a ton. So I think Orlov just makes a ton of sense there. What do you think?
I do think it makes a ton of sense as well. We know that Florida is going to be looking to add, especially to their depth on the blue line. But the only thing I wonder about is if it works financially for them in the long run, because let's not forget that in a year from now, they're going to need to give new extensions to guys like Brandon Montour and Gustav Forsling, who I think they absolutely want to keep, and as they should. I mean, those are 2 important defensemen to them. I mean, my goodness, Montour had 73 points this season. You could have made a case for him to win the Norris Trophy, and he had a really good playoffs as well. But in terms of the fit and adding to that blue line, I think a guy like Orlov would be perfect.
Well, and the reason I think it could work financially is that, this season at times, I know there was one point where they had to keep Duclair out of games when, by all accounts, he was healthy because the salary cap didn't work. I don't think there's a chance they go into next year having to hold guys out for on LTIR because the salary cap doesn't work. Like, I think they figure it out up front and restructure a bit, and then if they do that and are able to sign Orlov for, you know, what did I say, 6x6, 6x5, whatever it is, that top four all of a sudden looks pretty good and is pretty damn competitive amongst contending teams. So, you know, I think the fit is there. I think that they could swindle it financially if they wanted to. It'll all kind of depend what happens at the draft.
Yeah, definitely. So talking about Orlov, I kind of have an off-the-board pick for him as well. I don't have him going back to the Washington Capitals because, as we know, I think that the negotiations kind of fell off between Orlov and the Caps, and I'm sure he'd love to go back to Washington. He's expressed that, but I think term was the issue there. But I mean, after the season that he had and the playoffs, I think that, you know, there will be a lot of potential suitors that will give him that term that he wants. So I've kind of got a bit of an off the board pick. I've got him going to the Dallas Stars on a deal around $5.5 million times 5 years. So about $500,000 short compared to your deal there, Chad. So now, this would be more of a challenge financially for the Dallas Stars. The only way that I could see this happening, and Dallas would have to do it in a couple of days before the buyout window closes, but I think they would have to buy out a guy like Ryan Suter. He's got 2 years left at $3.65 million, and we saw that he really struggled in the playoffs, and I just think that because he struggled so much, you know, Dallas just didn't have a lot on the back end, and I think that hurt them, especially against the Vegas Golden Knights in that Western Conference Finals, because that blue line on the Golden Knights was just unbelievable. So I think if Dallas can buy out Suter in the next couple of days, and I mean, it's a huge hypothetical, but it's something that's been out there. If they can also move on from a guy like Colin Miller, who only has a year left on his contract at just under $2 million, around 1.85. You know, if they can send him to a team like Chicago, for example, who, you know, cap space is not an issue and it gives them a player that can help them a little bit, they could make this work with Dmitry Orlov. And then you've got a guy who can play with Heiskanen. You elevate Thomas Harley in the lineup as well. He maybe becomes a top four guy, and then that improves your blue line, because I do feel that, I think all of us feel that Dallas is very much in that championship window with the group that they have. So, I've got Orlov to the Stars, kind of an off the board pick, but I've got him going there, $5.5 million times 5 years.
Yeah, I could see that happening, and I like the fit too, but like you said, there are a few things that have to happen for the money to work there. And I think they also want to try to keep Max Domi. So it depends what his number comes in at as well.
That's true. So
there's a lot to consider, but Domi was really good for them down the stretch and in the playoffs. So I think that's a player they like and want to keep. And he even tweeted, I think it was yesterday or whenever the awards were, last night, I guess. Yeah. And he said, you know, it's crazy how Heiskanen wasn't in the top 3 in Norris Trophy voting, because he thinks he's that good, and he is, and he carries that back end, and that's a little bit of the problem. You need a bit more there, which is kind of crazy because, you know, just a few years ago when you looked at that blue line, you thought, wow, you know, that's pretty strong, but you've got some players aging. Ryan Suter, I thought at the time after the buyout, was a great pickup, but again, he's a bit of an older guy, and even though he doesn't make the crazy money he once was in Minnesota, you know, it's still money that could be used elsewhere better. And if that's on Dmitry Orlov, they get better immediately. I just don't know if the money works. We'll have to see.
Yeah, exactly. And just as a side note for the Stars, I wonder if maybe Oliver Ekman-Larsson could be a fit there. The cost would be a lot cheaper than Dmitry Orlov, and as we know, OEL is a free agent after being bought out by the Vancouver Canucks, so maybe that could be an option. They've certainly gone down that road before, as we mentioned with Suter, where, you know, a good defenseman gets bought out and then becomes available, so maybe they go down that route again. And you're right, Max Domi certainly could sign an extension there. I don't think it's a guarantee that he's returning to Chicago. That's certainly been out there. He certainly liked playing there, but he did fit really well with the Dallas Stars. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Just before we wrap up here on the Stars and Orlov, what if the Stars circle back to a guy like Klingberg now that he's not perceived to be worth as much money as he was a couple years ago?
That's true too.
And they know the guy, it's a good fit. I mean, the reason that they traded him out, or the reason that he wasn't kept in Dallas, was because he wanted a long-term deal and Dallas didn't feel like it was worth it. Maybe they circle back and say, okay, you've kind of bounced around the league a little bit now. And I mean, he went to Anaheim and didn't have a very good year, but maybe they say, listen, maybe you're not the $7 million player. Maybe you're a $5 million player for, 3 years or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out here right now. But Klingberg's another guy who's up this year. It's been rumored that he'll go to another, dumpster team, and then they'll just flip him at the deadline for picks, similar to what we thought would happen last year, and similar actually to a Max Domi, which did happen last year. So just throwing something out there. I could maybe see that working if the Orlov thing falls through.
Yeah, no, I could see that as well.